Excellent. We are live. We're going to give all our audiences to tune in. We'll give them a minute before we actually start with the podcast. We'll be on standby for the next 40 seconds. It is really funny, right? Getting into the podcast and waiting for the alarm clock to ring and we start. Just 10 seconds. I think that's all the patience that we need now.
Awesome. Looking
Okay.
forward to it.
Awesome. All right, time. Hello everyone, and welcome to Vadantis Thought Leadership podcast today. I am Rohan Salvi, Associate Director here at Vadantis, and I'm excited about this episode with our special guest today, Christopher Henry, Director of Information, Inventory Transformation and Excellence at Smurfit WestRock. Chris, thank you very much about the time that you are spending with us today, and welcome to this platform.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Rohan, and thanks to the Verdantis team for hosting this.
Awesome. Chris, you have decades of experience in paper, pulp, and several other manufacturing sectors. I'm excited about our conversation given your vast experience in the inventory excellence. You have led large scale inventory transformation programs. You played a vital role in implementing SAP S4 HANA, and then you are also leading initiatives towards building a robust, excellent master data at Smurfit WestRock. So, uh, just in terms of your career journey, if you could help us with a view in terms of what drew into this space, how has your perspective on supply chain and inventory evolved over these past few years?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So my journey in inventory management began in the military. So I worked in aviation supply,
Mm.
and there the data was provided in a very structured and reliable format. So my focus was solely on just figuring out how much to keep on the shelf for that immediate availability of parts. So the equipment's parts list or bombs and all that, they were all well defined, and every part had a unique part number assigned by the government.
Mm.
So when I transitioned to private industry, that was a different story. I quickly realized that the data governance was severely lacking,
Mm.
inconsistent, and then achieving those inventory optimization goals and levels that I was looking for really meant needing to go back to the foundational level of the data. So as a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, I realized that the constraint in my system, was no longer with the analysis and information, but really went back to data capture and validity.
Okay, okay, okay. Fair. And then, were there pivotal moments that shaped your thought process in terms of how to achieve data-led excellence?
Yeah. So the first pivotal moment came to me when I realized we measured that the average processing time to create a new item at the
Mm.
company at the time was 115 days.
That's
So
huge.
this opened my eyes and led me to realize that nothing should be assumed, and that excellence in data management does not happen by accident. Right. So
Mm.
data management needs and deserves the attention of leadership, and to realize the potential of any of the operations, maintenance, sales, you name it, really needs a focus on the data portion.
Okay.
Um, Another pivotal moment was I was tasked with maximizing our utilization of preferred suppliers.
Okay.
So ideally, you're going to have a record that's going to validate whether the supplier can provide what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
A price that you can record within the system, and a mechanism to point that item at that location to that preferred supplier that you're trying to maximize that spend with, or to migrate to a better relationship or a bigger relationship with them. So without that item record there, what you're left with is basically having to train every requisition or buyer purchaser out there
Mhm.
on every item. Who is your preferred supplier? What's the
Mhm.
buying channel that's most optimized? Which is just it. That's not really possible. So what we're left with, in Happy Path, is a well-maintained item record where this becomes an efficient process of data management.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah. And so again, from an item master perspective, I think well-maintained item master probably gives the user the ability to basically take a decision by running the report, rather than having to drill through several item masters together. Right? Understood.
Absolutely, and it's a lot easier than second guessing or determining every purchase how
Yeah,
you're going to initiate that.
fair. Understood. Understood. Okay, so I think in the next section, we'll switch over to aligning inventory strategies with business objectives. So my first question in this is, in asset-intensive industries such as yours, data management is often the key for optimization. So what are some of the top strategic priorities for inventory and supply chain teams that you have laid today?
Sure. So total cost of ownership is always a priority, right? And this moves beyond the bit piece price of a given asset or spare, right? This goes to longevity, reliability, support, continuous improvement commitments from your suppliers. And each of those is its own data stream, on its own analysis, something to be tracked.
Mhm.
This can take the form of warranty tracking, mean time to failure, project status, on and on. But each require and demand their own analysis.
Mhm.
Um, another initiative is lead time management,
Okay.
particularly in the supply chain position that we're in today. Um, in inventory management, longer lead times need to be mitigated with increased local inventory, which is not necessarily a good thing. So back to that low cost solution may end up being the slowest replenishment
Right.
times. So at that point, the cost savings you're getting are going to be offset by that surge of inventory necessary to maintain those service levels. Um,
Mhm.
the data challenge there is that it requires continuous monitoring, adjustments by the supplier, by the location, to highlight these lead times as they're dynamically changing and to adjust to them and leverage them even when they're shortening even.
Okay. Okay. Okay, understood. And how does inventory data support this type of broader transformation goal? Like digitization, resilience, or even process excellence uh, as a whole.
Yeah, so inventory data underpins all of the transformation efforts. So
Mhm.
by one example, by eliminating duplicate records, uh, we can free up working capital. That also ensures that parts are readily available across different regions and even and globally.
Okay.
Um, having that record leads to better analysis on the demand and usage patterns, allowing us to identify the optimal buying channel for each and every item. So when we apply that, it essentially becomes a playbook for every item and becomes the guidelines for procurement
Mhm.
operation. And the result is increased partsability, more efficient maintenance and procurement operations, ultimately greater equipment uptime and production.
Okay. Okay. And I think for this process, part interchangeability might also play a vital role, right? In terms of getting a view, in terms of what are the available options, and whether it is regionally or across different sites, location geographically as well. Right?
Absolutely. If you don't have that reliable data
Mhm.
and valid data,
Mhm.
um, there's no analysis to be done. But when you have
Okay.
that at your fingertips, it's fairly easy to come up with a model of those parts distribution or regionalization or hub and spoke.
Okay.
But it's paramount on having that item record that's again clean, so you can take
Mhm.
advantage of all the inputs.
Now, in your view, how is excellence connected to the inventory excellence connected to the critical outcomes, like cost optimization, or supply chain reliability, or even from an ESG perspective? How is it critical for these outcomes?
Yeah. So for me, inventory excellence is connected to those concepts by contributing to answering the question, just what is it that we're purchasing? So
Hmm.
creating that record to control and document the purchases with good descriptions, manufacturer's part number, supplier part number, all that data is necessary for the analysis, for cost optimization, for environmental social governance, and reliability tracking. So in
Okay.
contrast to that kind of robust documentation,
Hmm.
we have what we call open text requisitions, or
Hmm.
dear buyer, please,
Correct, correct.
please go buy
Free
me this
text.
thing. Yeah, and that's often very ambiguous. You can't answer the
Mhm.
question, what have we bought over time. Those demand patterns just don't aren't available to analyze, and just not available to support those initiatives. So that creation of a quality material record, again, is paramount for capturing data for any of these goals.
Yeah. About just about 60 minutes back, I was having a conversation where the customer shared with us a view that only 25% of their spend is cataloged, and everything else is free text purchases, and they're looking to identify a way that can they run some analysis to identify, out of all these free text purchases, what should we catalog.
Yep,
So again, exactly to your point. So
absolutely.
invent.
We want to make the right thing to do the easy thing to do. So that
Yeah.
analysis of what is it we're buying, what are we buying the most frequently, and that transition from that identification to that quality item record. If we make
Mhm.
that as seamless as possible, now you've got data that you can turn into information.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. So now, from an inventory management perspective, for large asset intensive organization, it can be really a complex process. Even minor issues that generally might go unnoticed, it can lead to an operational impact when because they can scale up quickly. So what are the common challenges? What are the biggest challenges really that you have faced in this particular space?
So one of the biggest challenges has definitely been dealing with that old stale inventory that just takes up
Mhm.
space and carrying costs, and just sits there. So even though you can optimize stocking levels dynamically on things that move,
Mhm.
it's that non-turning inventory that really poses the challenge.
Correct.
So getting stakeholders on board with offloading parts or doing that review, requires that robust data governance, data analysis. What is this item? What's attached to? Presenting that as a review that may lead to a disposition or an offloading of that inventory. Um,
Mhm.
Now we can mitigate the buildup of that stale inventory by controls on the front end of item creation.
Correct.
So, controls throughout the whole life cycle can include, approvals,
Mhm.
and signals when their stocking level changes, when equipment attachments are applicable and need to be extended to those equipment records,
Mhm.
criticality changes,
Mhm.
obsolescence when capital project might make it
Correct.
obsolete, superseding,
Mhm.
decommissioning of equipment, and again, it's all identify. It's all about the identification of the thing and where it sits in the metadata, so that you can review and determine, with quality information, what you should do with that record, before it gets
Okay.
to the point where it's sitting there with an inch of dust on it.
Agree. Agree. And then there is today with the agentic AI, there are so many recommendations in terms of what has gotten stale, what is discontinued, obsoleted. So I think there is definitely uh, a technology that supports the current requirements, but eventually, getting the business onboarded on, getting rid of stale data, I think that is one of the biggest challenges, if I understand this right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Uh, Now, how do you get or ensure alignment in terms of inventory control, procurement, and maintenance teams? These are huge business functions. Have their own priorities.
Right.
So of course the production has to keep running, procurement has to get it at the optimum, overall working capital, and then inventory has to maintain the optimum level without any downtime. So how do we get an alignment?
Sure, sure. So my teams are amazing, and we purposely built the organization that I lead to have responsibilities in each of those spaces.
Mhm.
Remember, my original contribution to the company was supply chain design, but I did so while reporting into the maintenance
Mhm.
department. So that original team was embedded in maintenance practices and understood that our primary goal was parts availability. Right? I didn't move into procurement until later, and
Mhm.
procurement was, the primary, was a primary customer as well. So that field team I was discussing, the maintenance support team, still exists,
Mhm.
but it was elevated to serve as internal support for all storerooms and all maintenance department, and we work as trainers and stand-in support. And that team keeps my organization focused on priorities of the maintenance teams. So,
Okay. Okay.
and then another team is solely focused on the item records themselves. This includes setting up the records, the stewardship of the records, historical cleanup, the life cycle
Mhm.
of that record, and they could cleanse data for its own sake. But the
Okay.
influence that that maintenance support team brings keeps them focused on the subset of materials that really have the most opportunity to be leveraged.
Okay. And
And then,
on sorry,
yeah,
go ahead. No, no,
well,
sorry, please go ahead.
yet another team is my business intelligence team, and they support both the data team and the field team. So the priorities
Okay.
of the business intelligence team come from a healthy collaboration between those two other teams on what we actually tackle that is meaningful to the business. Um, but
Yeah.
you're not in a position to have those influences, organic to your team, right? It does include bringing in those stakeholders, regular council meetings, stakeholder, diverse stakeholders that come in and bring their views onto all the initiatives and help you prioritize your backlog of work. Um, Now, embedded in the integrity software available from Verdantis, there are the approval routes. They include
Mhm.
a wide range of stakeholder and local influence, right? Whether that's budget holders that can approve that new item creation and that initial stocking levels, local subject matter experts, configuration on how that item is going to be treated locally. We bake that into the front end of the new item creation or extension
Approval
process,
process.
and
Correct.
then they feel like they're part of it. In it's now they're part of the solution instead
Mhm.
of us, just messing with their data.
Mhm. Mhm. Correct. And from the team structures perspective, you mentioned several, teams that fall into the overall, workflow, right? Which teams did you find need to be, a more centralized, role where they, manage the overall global processes?
Yeah, so centrally we do have stewardship, who
Mm.
their primary responsibility is to review and enhance what comes in from a field technician or local user, right?
Mm.
Um, at the local level, right, they have an idea of what they want. They have some information, maybe it might be limited, and they also hold the budget for
Mm.
the initial stocking level. So that all has to take
Okay.
place locally. Now, if it's a safety item or a production item that interacts with multiple operations, there is an additional central review, and then
Okay.
through a stewardship and a
Okay.
unique perspective or a unique role that the data stewards play on my team is they have not only a responsibility, but they're expected to
Mm.
enhance that original record, right? Let's make a better description
Okay. Fair.
than the user gave. Let's go ahead and do a little bit more research. and make that as robust as possible, so we're not guessing later on. What is it they mean when they created this record?
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I can imagine the scenario where run a query and then 10 things come on the screen and you cannot guess, okay, which out of those 10 is the one that I need.
Absolutely, absolutely. So on the front end, we try to we require certain must have information, right? You
Mhm.
have to pick a noun, you have to pick a modifier, certain attributes that are critical, and then it kind of trails off from there.
Yeah,
That's enough to identify it, right? It's a manufacturer's part number,
correct.
but we also want to go a step further and say if there's something we know about this item, let's get it into that record,
Correct.
so that as you're perusing the catalog, maybe you don't know
Mhm.
exactly what you're looking for. You have as much information as possible at your disposal to make that selection.
Correct. So now, I think there are from this overall transformation perspective, right? So I'm sure that you must have put certain metrics to measure the success of the transformation. Availability or service levels or adoption. User adoption is definitely a major one there. So what were the metrics that you had put together for measurement of this uh, success of the transformation?
Yeah. So tactically, we made sure to define the standards around what a quality record should look like, right?
Mm.
So our catalog grew through acquisition, and it was a bunch of different ERPs that kind of combined in different generations, even within the same legacy ERP. But it really wasn't harmonized in any way. So now that
Mhm.
we have a standard and a structure, we can measure against that, right? Do we
Mhm.
have null or blanks? Do we have 5-letter descriptions, right? Whatever it is, and we set each of those validation points
Okay.
up, and we measure, what's basically a success or failure, or a defect, right? On ends up being called a suspect data record,
Mhm.
and those suspect data records we can resolve in a couple different ways. First way is if there's on-hand quantity somewhere, we're going to go look at the thing. Maybe it was set up originally with the OEM as the
Okay.
supply, as the manufacturer. A lot of the time, the OEM is actually the supplier, not the manufacturer. So we want to go in and overwrite that OEM with the true manufacturer and get the data elements in the right places. Again, because we've
Mhm.
identified that OEM and the manufacturer's place is probably suspect.
Correct.
Repeat for each of those other data elements I talked about. Now, if you don't have on-hand quantity, it's an on-demand item, or we simply don't have any on the shelf, right? That enters into the backlog of research. With the information you do have, whether it's a description, a supplier partner number, manufacturer's part number, right? That's where we, as specific pain points come up, we go into that backlog of work, find those
Mhm.
items, enhance them with research. Or that becomes the
Mhm.
population that we enter into agentic AI to do that research
Okay.
for us.
Correct. Excellent. And I think
Um,
that, sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I'll say so. That's tactically what we did with item records.
Okay.
There's a ton more we can talk about inventory optimization, right?
Uh-huh.
So, you know, spares inventory as a percentage of your asset values. Um, Machine downtime, for the reason code, waiting on parts.
Mhm. Correct.
My personal favorite is supply
Mhm.
effectiveness, which
Okay.
answers the question: is the part available in full in the quantity that was requested at the time it was needed? This one
Correct.
is it's difficult to
Uh-huh.
measure, because it's hypothetical, right? It's not that you issued
Yeah.
it on time necessarily. It's could you have? And so a lot of
Mhm.
ERP systems do not go to that
That
level of
level of depth.
analysis because
Correct.
it's not stagnant,
Okay.
information. It's kind of extra to it.
Correct.
We talked about stale inventory, right? That absolutely has to be defined, tracked, recorded, presented, and final disposition. Keep versus offload determination
Mhm.
really should be made. Another one I really like is bill of material utilization, right? Of the
Okay.
items that are in your local catalog, how many of those, or what percentage of those, what ratio is on a
Uh-huh.
bill of material or that equipment's parts list? Because again, that analysis of what do we do with these spare parts comes down to where do we use it? What's the criticality of that equipment?
Mhm.
And If your company has decided that it's only going to be spare parts, then maybe you can get to 100% bill of material utilization in your storeroom. But if your company allows janitorial supplies, facility supplies in your storeroom, maybe you only top out at 80%. So that's an internal benchmark that you have to kind of determine on your own to see where the goal is.
Mhm.
And then, so you add that up with dynamic stocking levels, figure
Mhm.
out should be on consignment, figure out what should be on vendor managed inventory. And really, with all that, you should have a line by line optimization plan for everything in your catalog.
Mhm. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I think on the metrics, I think it's time to switch over to innovations and exciting developments. Uh, Maybe if you could share some recent breakthroughs or use cases with our audience today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, most proud of how we tackled duplicate records in the system. Right. So we normalize manufacturer's part number, put them through a conflict analysis, and if there's no conflict in the descriptions or these other data elements, we group those as one common item, even though they share different item records, and that opened us up to lots of opportunities. Right, parts sharing, the disposition of stale inventory. Could
Mhm.
you transfer it internally as opposed to selling it for scrap or third party market, um, and in doing that deduplication work, we were also finally able to do an analysis. We had a hypothesis that moving to regional stocking may be beneficial and reduce the overall inventory necessary.
Mhm.
Uh, we found that we actually didn't have that many common parts in given regions. So we were able to set that aside and say a regional strategy at this point doesn't make sense for us.
Mhm.
However, again, that stale inventory, now we have all these other options. It's not just where you share an item record, but it's where you share a duplicate group, where we can proactively redistribute those assets internally. And that is tens of millions of dollars potentially of internal transfers and cost avoidance on the next time we need to buy that thing. Instead of sitting as stale inventory at one site, it is now active inventory at another.
Oh, yeah, yeah, makes complete sense. And thanks so much. Now, I think this is one. I would say I think we would share a view that best of the technologies cannot always solve the challenges that are often because of gaps in processes and then adoption. Right. So
Yep.
this said, do you see technologies like AI and the agentic solutions influencing the future of inventory management?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a few key areas: contract management,
Mhm.
pulling metadata to negotiations, auto drafting, auto populating drafts with predetermined templates.
Mhm.
Absolutely, tons of opportunity there. Record creation and stewardship, both on the item side and on the vendor side.
Mhm.
Walking those items through their life cycle, enhancing them again without having a person necessarily researching every item at
Mhm.
every Google search, right? It's have a person in the middle, but let the AI do the work.
Uh,
Before we talk about dynamic stocking levels and lead time analysis, that's a
mhm.
lot of data, and AI is probably best fit to do that in full. Guided buying, spend
Yeah.
analytics, tons and tons of opportunity there as well.
Correct, correct, correct. Good, good, good. Now, what would be your advice for leaders who are exploring AI first solution across data, inventory, and production management?
I would say keep in mind the expectation of your customers. Right? What are their goals? Right? There's plenty of AI solutions out there that have functions and features that you've never thought of before, but do not let the new capabilities distract you from the underlying goals of your organization. You're going to find them out there. And there's a good chance that AI can help, but make sure that you are removing obstacles that you've previously identified. You're not just adding complexity because it's the new shiny thing.
Mhm, mhm. Now, we have about 2 minutes left, so time for some fun, rapid fire round.
Sure.
We'll look to wrap this in a minute. So, first one is interesting. Name one common myth about inventory management you had like to burst.
Yeah, biggest one for me is that bulk discounts are a good idea. Back to the idea of throughput accounting. If you're purchasing something as raw material or what have you, if you don't have a sales plan for it, it's just going to end up back in that stale inventory. You're going to have heartache and processing costs and
Hmm.
working capital that's tied up the whole way through. And large businesses can absorb some of that, but it's still a very big negative, and I've often seen that being fatal for small businesses.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, what would be your favorite book, tool, or influencer or framework for supply chain transformation?
Yep. The goal, Dr. Eli Goldratt. Some of his other work, it's not luck and critical chain, goes specifically into supply chain design, and that theory of constraints is what we use, and it's very effective.
Oh, okay. Okay. A principle that you follow managing complexity, whether it's in your role or life, that has always served you well.
Yeah. So for me, I live by there is no waste so great as doing something well that should not have been done at all. Right. So
Hmm.
I keep a do not do list as a constant reminder of ideas, initiatives, things that can come up that we've set aside, and make sure to address that so that they don't creep themselves back up again.
Okay. Okay. Think we are at the hour mark. Just, Chris, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you here on today's podcast. We truly appreciate your time and insights. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. We wish everyone a great day ahead, and stay tuned for the next session on Vadantis Thought Leadership series. Again, Chris, thank you so much for your time, and it has been an honor to host this session with you.
Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you. You have a good day. Bye now.